Hello, hey everyone, am I audible? Please let me know in the live chat. Okay, great. Let's just wait a few more minutes so that we can have everyone here and we'll get started right away. Cool. Okay. Okay, I think we should get started now. Okay, cool. Okay, guys, so this is great that you have joined me here today on a Saturday afternoon to learn JavaScript with me. So I'm really excited to introduce JavaScript to you. One of the most widely used and popular languages at the moment. Uh, it's going to be great. I hope you do learn the basics of JavaScript so then you can also get started on your own. Uh, but anyway, we at Duolearn will also be doing more intense workshops coming on JavaScript as well. So let's get started. Right. So what is JavaScript? So JavaScript is just a programming language, right? Which is primarily used in browsers, or you might say in web development. So in any website you see, there will be a lot of interactions you could be doing. For example, if I go to Bootstrap site, right, you can see all of this stuff over here. Most of this is HTML and CSS, but there are things here that happen that are due to JavaScript, such as if I click on this, the coming of this little drop down is probably with the help of JavaScript. And if I make this on a mobile screen, you could see that we will get a like an icon like this, and when you click on this we see a sidebar coming up, right? This is also with the help of JavaScript. So JavaScript in the browser or in a web app is essentially used for interactions such as this. But of course JavaScript goes way beyond just doing interactions, right? We can also do all of the stuff like interacting with the server or making the website more animative, like that. Okay, so maybe we'll go a little bit into history of JavaScript, right? So JavaScript was created by Brendan Eich at the time where they needed a good language for browser. So the entire goal of JavaScript was to be able to have a programming language inside the browser. But soon later, uh, Ryan Dahl created Node.js, which is essentially a C++ program that will run JavaScript in any kind of machine, basically. So with the invention of Node.js, JavaScript even blew up. It got even more popularity. People started using JavaScript everywhere they can, building servers, building APIs. They started doing a lot of things with the help of Node.js as well. So sometimes people also get confused Java with JavaScript, but that's not correct. They're both very different languages. They have their own way of writing code, the way they work, and also as well as use cases. They are very, very different. Yes, there might be similarities as any two programming languages might have. Okay, so let's get started with coding. So I'm gonna go ahead over to Code Sandbox IO, and go ahead and create a sandbox. So I'll get a static template, and this static template gives me with some basic HTML, some header, some head and some body and stuff. So we're gonna add JavaScript to this page, right? So the way you can add JavaScript to an HTML is like you can add directly in between script tags, like so. You can do like this, and you can add the JavaScript in between here, right? And yes, you can also add it at the end of the body. So adding at the end of the body is preferred due to a couple of reasons. One is that when a browser renders your HTML page, right, it reads it from the top down. So when it is doing that, if the JavaScript is put in front or if it put in above, it's going to execute the JavaScript first, and thus your website will look blank until the JavaScript is completely executed, and then the markup or the markdown actually shows up. So that's why if you put it at the end of the body, so that markup or the content will load first, and whatever the script you wrote will also run later, enabling the site to kind of give the feeling that it loaded faster. The another reason we would use script at the end is because let's say you wanted to access a certain element in your in your HTML, and that would not be available at the low if the script was in the beginning of the head or in the head. So that's why if we have it in the end of the body, we will be certain that the elements will load before the script is loaded, and thus we can also use it inside the script. So JavaScript is loaded in most browsers already. So if you head over to a site, and if you go click on inspect element, your developer console will open up, and if you go to console, you can actually write JavaScript directly here in the console. I will actually use Chrome, so since that's the most used one. Okay, so if I go to inspect, I can see this coming up. I'll make this a little bit, yeah, it should be enough. So this is kind of like an interactive environment where you can directly execute JavaScript. So we can say like console.log, we can put in like hello world, and the console will print it. So what this means is, we will explore this later as well. So essentially you can run expressions, statements, all in this little environment as well. You can also do mathematical stuff like this, that also supported by JavaScript directly. uh, yeah. So now let's add the HTML to our site over here, right? Okay, so I will add the same console log statement over here. Hello. So I saved it, and if I open the console in code sandbox, I can see that it printed hello. Okay, so now what I want to do is separate this JavaScript, from the HTML, so that we can actually write it in a way that it is separated from HTML. These do not have to be together, so why not just have it in a separate file, right? So I'm going to create a file. Just click on the new file button here. It will create a file here. I'll give it index.js. And to refer this index.js file in our HTML, we'll have to do something like this. We'll remove this. And to script, we'll give src and the name of the file. So if I write something in here, let's say console.log hello world, and say both of them, and I will see hello world getting logged in here. Okay, now let's head over to some of the programming concepts, right? So one of the common concept, or the basic concept we all ideally begin a language to learn with, is to learn variables first. So a variable is like it's like a container for any value you want to store. So if I have something like this, let's say this is a variable and it has a value of 10, it holds a value of 10, and I can give it a name as well to this box, right? I will call it a number one, something like that. So I know now this number 1 means this number 10, right? Because this is the label for this container or this box. So inside the box we have a value of 10. That's essentially what a variable is. The variable will have an identifier name, and it's also going to have a value of any given value. Okay, I'm gonna yes. So that's how you store how I would represent a variable in any language. So let's see how we can also do the same in JavaScript. So I will head over to the Chrome, and to declare a variable we will use let. I'll call it number 1 and equals to 10. So this is exactly what we just spoke about. So this is the name of the variable and this is the value. So we have to assign it with an equals symbol, right? And this is the word that lets JavaScript know that, hey, I'm declaring a variable and this is the name and this is the value. Now we can also access this by just calling it like this. Now we see that the console is saying that the value held in number 1 is 10. Now if it could also change it to number 20, it will check it, it's also number 20. We can also console log variables like so, and the console log will actually log the value held in number 1. So that's how we can declare variables. Now there's another way you can do, that is using the keyword const, right? So you can give it const text equals to hello. Now to have strings or is just any kind of words or sentences, characters, letters you want to have or hold in a variable, you have to give these double quotes, or even single quotes also works. So you give the text in double quotes and assign it to a variable like this as well. So now that is done. If I access text, I will get the output as hello. I can also again console log it, and we also get that. So there are certain rules to follow when you're naming variables, such as you cannot give keywords as the variable names, such as let is a keyword that JavaScript knows and interprets differently. So you cannot give let equals to a, you will get an error because let is cannot be used as a name. Similarly, you cannot also use const, you cannot also use several number of keywords that are in JavaScript as variable names. Okay, now that is done, we will now get into writing a simple program, right? Let's try to write a simple program in our code sandbox. So let's say I want to let's keep it really simple, right? Let's say I want to add maybe a few numbers together and display it on the console. So I could go ahead and declare the numbers like this: let n1 equals to 20, let n2 equals to 30, and then we could do something like this: let sum equals to n1 plus n2, and then we can console log sum, and we should see it log. Yep, it's logging 50. That is cool. Now let's say we wanted to store several variables such as const first name equals to Ryan, last name equals to Dow. Now instead of doing this, what we can also do is use objects. So objects is a way of storing similar data together in a single variable. You could also, so essentially you could do const person, right, and equals to object literal. So if you give curly braces like this means it's an object literal, and meaning the person is going to be an object. So we could go and do it like this: first name, and to assign value to this key, we have to use this colon, as opposed to how we declare variables where we use equals to. Within an object, if you have to give values to certain keys, you would give it like this: you would give a colon and then give the value. So we'll go Ryan and say last name Dar, and don't forget to put comma after every key value initialization. So in an object, what's in the left is called key, and on the right it's called value. And how can we access this, right? How can we access the first name of Ryan? So we can access it in two ways. There are two ways to access any keys in an object. The one is the dot notation. The another one is bracket notation. Okay. So also this is how you can write comments inside JavaScript as well. So comments are essentially instructions or notes that you leave for others or for yourself to understand what's going on. So when JavaScript sees these double forward slashes, it's going to completely ignore whatever you have written or next to it. It is not going to execute that as a code, but just going to ignore, since it's just a comment. So I'm going to access the first name of person with the dot notation. So you can do person, and then if you do dot, you can access the keys or data available in person object. So I'll just go with first name, right? So that's how you access it. Now since we're now accessing it, let's also console log it, right? So that we know we're actually accessing it. Just gonna copy this and put it inside console log, right? That is dot notation. Now let's also see what is how to use bracket notation as well. Person, last name. Now if I run this, I should get Ryan and Dal both logged in. Okay, now we now just saw how we can have objects and how we can access it in two different ways. Oh, I'm sorry. I did it the same ways. So in bracket notation, after writing the name of the object you want to access, you open up a bracket next to it, and as string you have to access the second or any key you want to access. So now if I save this, I should get the same output as well. Yep, Ryan Dal. Cool. So that's bracket notation. So similarly, we can also store functions in an object. So now let's learn about function, right? So function is a set of code or a set of lines of code that you can reuse again and again by calling the name of the function. So a function can also give you an output. For example, if we have a function sum, if you have a function sum like this, and you give it two variables, right, a and b, and what sum will do is it's going to add it a plus b. So this would be the function definition of the function, to add a plus b, and it is going to return a sum. So this is the simplest explanation for a function. It takes in some inputs and then it gives an output, in our case a sum. Now the function doesn't always have to take input and give an output. It could just execute statements and just do nothing else. And we're gonna learn how we can also create functions of our own and use it in our code. So let's say I want to greet a person, right? So what I would do is I would want a function and I'll say, hey, greet this person. And what it would do then is say, hey Ryan, for this person, basically. So let's see, to define a function, we'll start with the keyword function, and we'll give a space, and we will give the function name greet, and then you have to open and close these small brackets, and then you open braces, and inside the braces is going to be the actual definition of the function. So let's say I want to console log hey person dot first name Ryan. So now if I call function greet, it should do this, right? So in order to call, so when you write the definition of a function, it is not going to be executed. I mean the code, right? Instead, this is not going to be run, but it's just going to be given the definition of function greet. Now to actually execute these lines of code, we have to call the function. So I'll just say greet. as we can see, it says hey Ryan. Okay, now yeah, now let's see how we can give input to the greet, right? So you can give input into a function by giving it a variable inside these brackets, right? I'll say I want to give the name person. I'll change this name to person1 so we do not get confused. Okay. So now this is called a parameter, right? Whatever the variables you declare for a function and that you use within a function is called a parameter. So now I'm accessing this person dot first name from the parameter and not from the person I have declared here. So now what I will try to do is I will try to use this greet function with this object so that this function actually greets this person object, right? So I'll just say greet, hey JavaScript, do the greet function on this object. That's essentially what this line will do now. So if I save this, okay, I think I got it the same. So let's try with last name as well. Hey yep, now you can see that it is logging hey Ryan dot full name. Another thing is this is called string concatenation. So you are joining two or more strings together using the plus with plus keyword. You can also do so plus can also be used to add numbers as we saw earlier, but if you use it on strings, they kind of join together and get logged. Now, as I said, you can also return stuff from function. So I will try to return this whole greeting thing as a string instead of directly console logging it. Okay, now I will just say return. So if you want a function to return something, you will have to use the keyword return. So I will say return this, hey person dot first name plus is exactly what we just logged, right? Okay, and I will remove this line. Now this function is doing nothing but concatenating all of these different strings or joining all of these strings together and returning it. Now if I run this, how do I clear this console? Let me try. Okay, I can click on this. Okay, now I cleared it, and if I save the new code, let's see what happens. Okay, we got this output, right? We got the sum, the first name, the last name logged, but we do not see this getting logged, hey person anymore. Oh, so what happening now is this greet function is returning this greeting, but we are not actually logging it. So in order to store it, we can do like this, like greeting equal to, and then we can log it. Now if I save this, I got the output here and all. So yeah, what we just did again is just call the function greet person, which creates this greeting and returns it, and then we just say that hey, store it in this variable greeting, and then it is getting logged in with the help of console.log. So that's about function. Okay, let's so to recap, we learned how to initialize variables and assign them values. We can learn that we can also do mathematical operations. We also learned that we can store strings or basically any kind of text inside variables and create objects, and how to access an object, how to create a function, how to give it a parameter and use it, and how to pass arguments. So when you declare a function and you pass something to it, it is called an argument, right? And when you access it inside the function, it is referred to as parameter. Many people get this wrong, but do keep that in mind. Now this inside this is parameter. When you pass it or when you're using it, it's then called argument to it. Okay. Now you could also directly put this like this instead of storing it in a variable. We would still get the same output. Saved it. Yeah. Okay. Now let's go on to learning a little bit about DOM. Now, some people get confused over DOM, but DOM is really simple, right? It essentially means it means document object model, right? Any kind of document being represented in a tree structure or an object is just a document object model, right? So as you can see in our HTML, we have a HTML tag, right? This is the main tag. Now this is the most highest tag in this hierarchy. Now next we have head. Head is the second element in our HTML and is the first child of HTML. And then we have meta tag, which is not a direct child of HTML, but is a subchild of HTML through head, right? So now then we have something called DOM manipulation. Now DOM manipulation is nothing but accessing your document and its objects through a language, generally JavaScript, right? What that means is that everything you have here, every element is represented as an object, which will have its own properties and stuff like this. So if the whole HTML was an object, it would be something like this would be HTML, and this would be head, and this would be body, something like that. So to show you actually how that works, if I say console.log document, you will see the whole document. What we see here, the Google's homepage, the Chrome's homepage, is basically an object like this, right? Inside document, you have its keys like head, and you have style, so you can keep on expanding till the end of the tree, and you get all the elements that are in the HTML that you see, or in the browser that you see through the document. Now you might have already guessed, but you can also do something like this, document.body. Now you get what's actually being seen inside here, document.body. Now we can also manipulate this with the help of DOM as well, which we will look into really soon. Okay, now that is DOM and how we can access DOM elements as well. So DOM is just an object with you can access all of its content through, like how we access the person object over here, we cannot do the similar thing. So like how we have keys values, where we have just strings attached to each keys, we can also have functions attached in any object. Like for example, let's say I have this h1, right? I'm going to give this h1 an ID like this. ID, I will say heading 1, okay? And I can access this with DOM through JavaScript like so. I'll see document get element by ID, and I'll say the element ID is heading 1. Now I'm accessing that particular heading, okay? and I'll say, hey, I want to change your text. I'll say inner text equals to hello. Now if I save this, it means that I'm accessing the heading 1, which is this, and setting its inner text to hello. So inner text is again a property of heading that you can change directly by assigning a new value to it. Now let's save it and see if it works. I have to save it here. Yep, there you see it. Now we just wrote a line of code that is accessing the HTML and dynamically changing the content as well. No. Okay, cool. So let's go a little bit deeper and see what else we can do. How would we build a little calculator, right? The same way we did earlier, where we'd actually just had the numbers to add stored in a variable, but this time we will take them from user and add it for them. Okay, let's do that. So for that we will need a couple of input elements, right? So I'll go ahead and create the input. So for each input we'd also need a label so that they know what the input takes or what it means. I'll say label, I'll just say A, right? It's going to be number A. We'll copy the same and I'll say number B, and they should also see the sum. I'll just put in a h6 tag, it should say sum. Sum equals to, going to be sum equals to A plus B. So now I want to save it. So I see that I have number A and number B and a sum just below it. I'll make it a little bit bigger by doing h3. Okay. Now let's try to access the value of B and actually print the sum. So when they enter the number, we would need a certain action that lets us know that hey, it's time to add. So for that, I'll go ahead and add a button over here. That will just say add. Okay, we have got the button over here. We are not going to worry much about the styling aspect of this little thing over here, because we're just going to concentrate the functionality as we're doing JavaScript. Okay. Now how can we do this? So first we would need to say on button click of this, I would want to fire a certain function. So let's go ahead and write a function that takes in two parameters, A and B, and returns the sum. So if you remember, you start the function definition by saying function and the function name and brackets, parenthesis, braces, and you'll say A and B. I want to take two parameters A and B and return the sum of both of them, A plus B. So that's our little function. Let's see if it works. I'm just going to call this a couple of times and see if it's working. Okay, let's save it. Okay. Right, so it's just returning it. Let's try to console log it. Save it. Receive. Okay. Okay, not sure why this is unable to give me this sum. Okay, we'll get back to that. Okay. Okay, now what we'll do is, I don't think it's not even getting this as well. Restart it. Oh, okay, I think there must be an error or something. Okay, no errors. Okay, now we're getting the console. So the reason that didn't work was we were trying to access an element with the ID heading 1, and thus it had gotten stuck at there, so it did not go further executing the code. Okay, now so when we click on button, we want something to happen, right? We want the number A and number B to be added. For that, we have written a function sum, which is going to add those two numbers. Okay, so first we will trigger this function, right, on the clicking of add. So for that, what we can do is we first have to access that button. So an easy way to access is to give it an ID, right? I'll just say add button, and I will access it. If you remember again, or get element by ID. So there are other ways to access elements as well. So if you type get element by ID, you see that there are a lot of ways that you can access an element. So we will go ahead and use ID, since the button is like a unique element with which we need to add this for function or definition to. Okay, so we'll say it's add button, and we will say add event listener. So add event listener will add any function you give it to a particular action or particular event that is going to happen on a button. So our event we want to listen, or we want to add, our function sum is for click. So we'll type click, we have it, and then we have to give the function for it. So that is going to be sum. So for now, I'm going to just say function console.log add. So just to see if our function actually gets fired when we click on the button add. So we just click on add. I can see that the add is getting logged. Okay. Now that we have attached a function to our button, let's see how we can access the value from these two inputs, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and do the similar thing. Give it an ID as well. I'll give it an ID of num a, and the ID for this input I will give num b. Okay. Now to get value of an input, we'll access the element first, and instead of inner text or something, we will do value to it. So let's try to store num a, right? Num a equals to document get element by ID, and it was, I guess, num a, and we'll do dot value. Let's try to console log it, see if we're getting it right. Okay, I'm gonna click on add. Okay. Since there is nothing over there, I'm actually seeing an empty string logged. So let's say I put in 12. I get 12, right? Cool. So now we are able to access the value of the input A. Now let's also access the input of num b. So I'm just gonna copy paste the same, change the variable name to num b, change the access set to num -b, and let's see if we're getting both of them properly. Okay, click on add. So let's give this 10 and this 12, and there we have it. So okay, now what we need to do is, in the sum, instead of returning anything, we actually want to have it over here. right? So if you remember, we can do that with setting the inner text of an element. So I'm gonna access this heading, right, which is going to be I'm gonna give the ID to the h3 ID some heading. I'll call it some results. So okay, let's access that some result heading, right? Get element by ID, going to be some result. So some result or results. I'll just keep it result. Some result. I'm going to change the inner text. Do something like this. Sum is let's store the sum variable first, right? And let's say sum is sum. We're doing the string concatenation thing we learned earlier, so you can add different kind of strings together. And now you might think that num a and num b might not be strings, but when you're concatenating with another string, they are included into strings. So let's save this and this, and let's see if this works. Let's give this 10 and 12, and if I click on add, sum is 10,012. Well, that's not right. So the thing is, when we try to access dot value of things, it is usually going to be of string. So let's just convert it into a number, right? So you can do that by calling it like this, number. So it's basically like converting the type of this from string or from, like, you know, from text to a number. So let's see if this works. There are other ways as well. You could use parse int. That's another function available to basically parse the number from a text. So let's see if this works. That sounds great. Okay. So that was it for this little JavaScript 101 workshop today. And now that it's almost over, we'd like to now tell you a little bit about the challenge we'd like you to do. So the challenge is going to be simple. We're going to also share a little bit of boilerplate code similar to this. So you'd only have to write JavaScript where it would be very similar to this. But what you have to do is just take 3 or 4 inputs similarly and do a little bit of math and show us in the page in your document. Okay, now speaking about next steps you would want to take, you could go ahead and learn more about DOM methods that are available. If you go to document MDN, you will see that it has a lot of methods and a lot of properties that you can access. So when I say method, it means it's a function that you can call, and when I say a property, it's something you can access or read. And sometimes you can also change by assigning it a value. So just like how we are doing it here, we're assigning a value to inner text. You can also do it to certain properties as well. So you can also change the title directly for any given page, like here with JavaScript. So yeah, go ahead and read this. I would also suggest to learn more about JavaScript through MDN as well. You could learn a lot, such as starting with all the different types of data types. More you could learn about arrays. You could, yeah, We will gonna have more of these workshops that are going to be more intense, more in depth on JavaScript. We're also gonna have workshops where we'll dig deeper into JavaScript, how it works, what are the gotchas you have to know when you're working with JavaScript. Such as we just discovered that this value was actually a string, and we're just concatenating multiple strings instead of adding them, right? So there are a lot of things like this that you should need to know while working with JavaScript. Those things are going to be covered soon in the upcoming workshops. So yeah, stay tuned. Join our WhatsApp groups and stuff. I believe we have that in the comment section, or in the description. If not, we will drop it in there. Okay. So that's it, guys. Thank you for joining on this workshop. We're going to share the link to submit the challenge. We hope you do that, and yeah, and get a certificate as well. Okay, cool. Thank you. Signing off. Dave.